The champagne bubbles looked like tiny diamonds floating in liquid gold, which seemed fitting since everyone at this party probably owned actual diamonds worth more than my house. I stood in the corner of Jessica's networking gala, watching Dallas's elite schmooze and backstab each other with practiced smiles. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," said Frank, my best friend, and the only other normal person in this sea of designer suits and Botox. "I'd rather be getting a root canal," I replied, adjusting my off-the-rack tie. "At least that would be over in an hour." Jessica floated through the crowd like she owned the place, which technically she did tonight. My wife had rented out the entire top floor of the Meridian Tower for this networking event, though I suspected it was more about showing off than actual business. "Evan, darling." Britt materialized beside us, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "You clean up nicely, almost like you belong here." "Thanks, Britt. You look expensive as usual." She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Jessica's outdone herself tonight. Have you met Austin Grant? He's absolutely divine. And successful. Did you know he just bought that new penthouse on Turtle Creek?" I watched Jessica lean in close to Austin Grant, CEO of some tech company I'd never heard of. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, perfectly groomed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. The way Jessica touched his arm made my stomach twist. "They make quite a pair, don't they?" Maya appeared, Jessica's other friend, equally fake, but less subtle about it. "They're just talking business," I said, though even I didn't believe it. "Oh, honey," Maya giggled. "That's not business. That's chemistry. Austin's got stamina, if you know what I mean. Not like some husbands who fall asleep watching Netflix." Frank shot me a warning look, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd learned to hide my reactions around Jessica's friends. They fed on drama like vultures. The party continued around us, a symphony of clinking glasses and hollow laughter. I found myself studying the crowd, using my engineering background to analyze the social architecture. Austin was clearly the alpha, surrounded by his inner circle, including Troy, his smarmy right-hand man. Jessica orbited around him like a planet drawn to the sun. "Excuse me," I said to Frank. "I need some air." I stepped onto the balcony, the Dallas skyline stretching out before me. The city lights twinkled like stars, beautiful but cold. Behind me, I could hear the party continuing, Jessica's laugh rising above the noise. That's when I heard Austin's voice, loud and confident, cutting through the chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention." I turned back toward the party, dread pooling in my stomach. Austin stood in the center of the room, Jessica beside him, both of them glowing under the chandelier light. "I have an announcement to make," Austin continued, his arm sliding around Jessica's waist. "Jessica, you've changed my life. You're brilliant, beautiful, and everything I never knew I was looking for." The crowd pressed closer, phones appearing to capture the moment. I felt like I was watching a car accident in slow motion. Austin dropped to one knee, producing a ring box that caught the light like a disco ball. "Jessica Hollis, will you marry me?" The room erupted in gasps and excited chatter. I stood frozen on the balcony, watching my wife's face transform with joy. "Of course," she squealed, not even glancing in my direction. "Of course! Yes!" The crowd exploded in applause and cheers. Champagne corks popped. Someone started playing music. And through it all, Jessica kissed Austin like I didn't exist, like our 10 years of marriage were just a footnote in her real story. I walked out without a word. 24 hours later, I sat in my downtown office, watching my phone buzz with its 184th missed call. Jessica's name flashed on the screen again, followed immediately by texts from her friends, Austin, and even Reynolds, Austin's security chief. "Jesus, Evan," Frank said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Your phone's been ringing nonstop for an hour." Funny how popular I became overnight. Frank studied me with his cop eyes. Even though he'd left the force to become a private investigator, he still had that ability to read people like open books. "What did you do?" I leaned back in my chair, feeling lighter than I had in months. I gave them exactly what they wanted, a clean slate. Meaning, I canceled all our joint accounts, froze the credit cards, and moved every penny to accounts Jessica doesn't know exist. Frank's eyebrows shot up. How much are we talking about? 300 million, give or take. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Frank's mouth opened and closed like a fish. 300. Evan, what the hell? Where did you get $300 million? Remember that software I developed for military logistics? The one I sold 5 years ago? I never told Jessica the real number. She thought it was a few $100,000. Enough to pay off the house and buy her car. But it was 300 million. I've been living off the interest, letting her think my consulting business was supporting our lifestyle. She never asked questions as long as the money kept flowing. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail from Jessica's lawyer, some slick fixer named Davidson who specialized in high society divorces. Frank shook his head slowly. So when Jessica finds out? She already has. That's why the phone won't stop ringing. As if on cue, my office door burst open. Jessica stormed in, her face flushed with rage, still wearing yesterday's party dress, but looking significantly less glamorous. "What the hell did you do?" she screamed. "Good morning to you too, dear." "Sleep well?" Don't you dare act casual. My cards are frozen. The accounts are empty. I can't even buy coffee." "That's unfortunate. Maybe Austin can help with that." Jessica's eyes flashed dangerously. "This is about last night?" "Grow up, Evan. We haven't been happy for years." "You're right. We haven't. So I'm helping you start fresh. Completely fresh." Austin appeared in the doorway, looking less polished than usual. His perfect hair was mussed, and his shirt was wrinkled. "Hollis, we need to talk." "I don't think we do." Austin stepped into the office, his presence filling the space with aggressive energy. "You can't just steal money that belongs to your wife." "Steal?" I stood up slowly, feeling Frank tense beside me. I moved my money from accounts I opened, using funds I earned, from a business I built. Jessica's name was on the accounts as a courtesy. That courtesy has been revoked. "Half of everything you earned during the marriage belongs to Jessica," Austin said, his voice taking on a threatening tone. Then she should have thought of that before she decided to upgrade her husband in front of 200 witnesses. Jessica moved closer to my desk, her voice dropping to the manipulative purr she used when she wanted something. "Evan, honey, I know you're hurt. But we can work this out. We can split everything fairly, and we can all move on with our lives." "You're right. We can all move on. You with nothing, me with everything I actually earned." "You bastard!" Jessica lunged forward, but Frank stepped between us. "I think it's time for you folks to leave," Frank said calmly. Austin's face darkened. "This isn't over, Hollis. Jessica has rights. Then she should exercise them through her lawyer. But she might want to find a new one." Davidson's retainer just bounced. The look of horror that crossed Jessica's face was worth every penny I'd moved. After they left, Frank poured himself a drink from the bottle I kept in my desk drawer. "You know they're going to come at you hard, right? Let them try. I've been planning this for longer than they think." "Planning what exactly?" I smiled, feeling truly happy for the first time in years. "Their complete and total destruction." 2 weeks later, Frank's surveillance equipment filled his office like a high-tech spider web. Cameras, recording devices, and computer monitors created a command center that would make the CIA jealous. "You sure about this?" Frank asked, adjusting the audio levels on a recording from the night before. "Play it." Jessica's voice filled the room, slightly slurred from wine. "The stupid bastard thinks he's so smart. But Austin says there are ways around prenups. We just have to prove he's hiding assets." Britt's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Honey, you're talking about Evan Hollis. The man who thinks Olive Garden is fine dining. What assets could he possibly hide? That's what we need to find out. Austin's having his people look into Evan's business records. Maya's voice joined the conversation. I still can't believe you were married to him for 10 years. Austin's so much more substantial. In every way, if you know what I mean. The three women dissolved into giggles that made my skin crawl. God, remember that awful apartment he wanted us to live in when we first got married? Jessica continued. Thank God I pushed him to buy the house. At least that'll be worth something in the divorce. Speaking of which, Britt said, Austin mentioned something about making Evan's life difficult. Professional consequences for crossing the wrong people. Frank stopped the recording. They're planning to destroy your consulting business. Let them try. Most of my clients are government contracts. Austin's influence doesn't reach that far. You hope. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Reynolds, Austin's security chief. This should be interesting, I said, putting it on speaker. Mr. Hollis, this is Reynolds. Mr. Grant would like to meet with you. Privately. I can't imagine what we'd have to discuss. I think you can. 1 hour. The parking garage under Mr. Grant's building. Level B3. The line went dead. Frank shook his head. That sounds like a trap. Probably. But I'm curious what Austin thinks he can accomplish. An hour later, I stood in the concrete tomb of Austin's parking garage, my footsteps echoing off the walls. Austin emerged from behind a pillar, flanked by Reynolds and Troy. Hollis, thanks for coming. I was in the neighborhood. Austin smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'll cut to the chase. You're going to give Jessica what she deserves, and you're going to do it quietly. Or what? Or your consulting business disappears. I have friends in government contracting. One word from me, and you'll never work in this city again. I pretended to consider this. That's an interesting theory. Tell me, Austin, how many government contracts do you think depend on military logistics software? His confident expression faltered slightly. Because the software I developed? It's running supply chains for 3 different branches of the military. If something happened to me, if I suddenly couldn't provide support and updates, well, that would be a national security issue. Troy whispered something in Austin's ear. Austin's face went pale. You're bluffing. Am I? Reynolds, you did your research on me, right? What did you find about my military service? Reynolds looked uncomfortable. Special forces, logistics, and intelligence. And my security clearance? Still active. Austin's jaw tightened. This doesn't change anything. Jessica still has rights. Then she should pursue them legally. But threatening me? That's a mistake. I turned to walk away, then stopped. Oh, and Austin? You might want to have someone check your car. The McLaren in Space 47? I noticed the alarm was going off earlier. The 3 men rushed toward the elevator. I took my time walking to my own car, listening to Austin's scream of rage echo through the garage. Frank was waiting in the passenger seat, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Shrimp in the air vents? 2 pounds of jumbo shrimp, plus some Limburger cheese under the seats, and I may have accidentally spilled a bottle of fish sauce on the leather. The spray paint? Cheater in bright red across the hood. The security cameras were mysteriously disabled for 20 minutes. Austin's voice carried across the garage, a string of profanity that would make a sailor blush. Phase 1 complete, I said, starting the engine. The Dallas social scene moved faster than wildfire, and by the next morning, everyone knew about Austin's humiliation. The story had evolved in the telling. Some versions had me vandalizing his car in broad daylight. Others claimed I'd hired professional vandals. The truth didn't matter. What mattered was that Austin Grant, the untouchable CEO, had been touched. Jessica called me 17 times before noon. You're pathetic, she hissed when I finally answered. Destroying someone's car? What are you, 12? I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Evan. This has your fingerprints all over it. Actually, I was very careful about fingerprints. The silence on the other end was deafening. This is war, she finally said. No, Jessica. War would be if I cared enough to fight you. This is just pest control. I hung up and immediately called Frank. Phase 2? Already in motion. Maya's husband got some very interesting photos this morning. Maya's husband, Derek, was a successful plastic surgeon with a reputation for discretion. He was also pathologically jealous and had a temper that made Austin look like a choir boy. The photos Frank had taken showed Maya and Troy in a very compromising position at Austin's penthouse. Nothing illegal, but definitely not the kind of thing a married woman should be doing with her friend's fiancé's business partner. Derek threw her out this morning, Frank reported, froze all her accounts, filed for divorce, and called her parents to tell them what their precious daughter had been up to. And Maya? Blaming Jessica. Says Jessica encouraged her to live a little, and that the whole thing was Jessica's idea. Excellent. What about Britt? That's where it gets interesting. Remember how she was bragging about Austin's stamina? Hard to forget. Turns out Austin's wife hired her own private investigator. She's been building a case for months. The photos of Austin and Jessica were just the final nail in the coffin. Austin's wife, Caroline, was old Dallas money with connections that made Austin's tech fortune look like pocket change. She was also, according to Frank's research, absolutely ruthless when crossed. She's taking him for everything, Frank continued. The penthouse, the cars, half his stock options, and spousal support that'll keep her comfortable for life. So Austin's about to be significantly less attractive as a husband. Significantly less rich, anyway. That afternoon, I decided to make a social call. Jessica was staying at Britt's house since she couldn't afford a hotel, and Austin was too busy dealing with his own divorce to help. Britt's mansion in Highland Park was everything Jessica aspired to. Old money elegance with modern luxury touches. I rang the doorbell and waited, knowing they were watching me through the security cameras. Jessica opened the door looking haggard. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing clothes I recognized from our closet at home. What do you want? To talk. Privately. We have nothing to discuss. We have 10 years of marriage to discuss. And $300 million. She stepped aside reluctantly. The house was beautiful, but felt like a museum. All surface and no soul. Britt appeared in the hallway, her face flushed with anger. You have some nerve coming here. Britt. I hear Derek's keeping the house. Her face went white. That's none of your business. You're right. Just like my marriage was none of yours. Jessica led me to the living room, a space decorated in shades of cream and gold that probably cost more than most people's houses. Okay, we're alone. Talk. I want you to understand something, Jessica. This isn't about the money. Everything's about money. Not everything. This is about respect, about loyalty, about the fact that you humiliated me in front of 200 people. I fell in love with someone else. It happens. You fell in love with someone else's money. There's a difference. Jessica's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw the woman I'd married underneath all the ambition and manipulation. We weren't happy, Evan. We haven't been happy for years. You're right. We weren't. But there were ways to handle that with dignity. Ways that didn't involve public humiliation and betrayal. So what do you want? An apology? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You chose Austin over me. Fine. But you don't get to keep the life I built while starting a new one with him. Half of everything you earned during our marriage belongs to me. Then you should have stayed married to me. I stood up to leave, then turned back. By the way, you might want to check the social media feeds. Someone leaked the audio from your girls' night last week. The part where you called me stupid and talked about bleeding me dry. That's getting quite a lot of attention. Jessica's face went ashen. You recorded us? I didn't have to. Britt posted it herself on her Instagram story. She was drunk and thought it was hilarious. Unfortunately, she forgot that her account is public. I left Jessica staring at her phone, frantically checking social media to see the damage. Outside, Frank was waiting in his car. How bad is it? I asked, sliding into the passenger seat. Bad. The recording's been shared about 10,000 times. Someone made it into a meme. Jessica's face is all over Twitter with the caption, "When you try to upgrade but downgrade instead." And Austin? His stock dropped another 15% today. Investors don't like CEOs with messy personal lives. I felt a moment of something that might have been guilt, but it passed quickly. Jessica and Austin had made their choices. I was just making sure they lived with the consequences. 3 weeks later, Jessica and Austin were running out of options and money. Austin's divorce had been finalized with brutal efficiency. Caroline's lawyers had been preparing for months and struck like sharks smelling blood. He'd lost the penthouse, most of his cars, and a significant chunk of his company stock. Jessica's social circle had collapsed entirely. Maya was in her own divorce proceedings. Britt was facing bankruptcy after Derek froze all her accounts, and the rest of their friends had scattered like roaches when the lights came on. That's when they made their final desperate move. I was leaving my office late on a Thursday evening when Reynolds appeared in the parking garage. This time he wasn't alone. 2 other men flanked him, all of them looking serious and dangerous. "Mr. Hollis, Mr. Grant and your wife would like to see you. I'm not interested in another meeting. I'm afraid this isn't a request." The men moved closer, not quite threatening, but making their intentions clear. I could have fought, but I was curious to see what Jessica and Austin thought they could accomplish with intimidation. They drove me to an abandoned mansion in North Dallas, one of those old oil money estates that had been left to rot when the family money ran out. The place was massive and decaying, with broken windows and overgrown gardens that gave it a haunted appearance. Inside, the mansion still held echoes of its former grandeur. A grand staircase curved up to the second floor, and crystal chandeliers hung like frozen tears from the ceiling. But everything was covered in dust and decay, a perfect metaphor for Austin and Jessica's situation. They were waiting in what had once been a ballroom, the kind of space where Dallas society had once danced and schemed. Now it was just an empty room with water stains on the walls and holes in the floor. "Evan!" Jessica rushed toward me, but stopped when she saw my expression. "Thank God you're here. Not by choice." Austin stepped out of the shadows, looking haggard. His perfect hair was unkempt, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "We need to settle this," he said. "Tonight." "There's nothing to settle." Jessica made her choice, and I made mine. "You're destroying innocent people," Jessica said, her voice breaking. "Britt lost everything. Maya's marriage is over. Even Troy got fired because of the scandal." "Innocent?" "Jessica, you and your friends spent years treating me like furniture. Something useful but not worth noticing unless it stopped working." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" "How many times did Britt make jokes about my clothes, my car, my job? How many times did Maya suggest you could do better? How many times did you agree with them?" Jessica's silence was answer enough. Austin moved closer, his desperation making him dangerous. "Look, I'll be honest. Caroline took me for almost everything. The company's in trouble because of the scandal. I need Jessica to get half your money so we can start over. That's not going to happen." "Yes, it is." Austin pulled out a gun, his hand shaking slightly. "Because you're going to transfer $50 million to Jessica's account, and then you're going to disappear." I looked at the gun, then at Austin's face. "You're not going to shoot me. Don't test me. Austin, you're a tech CEO, not a gangster. You've never shot anyone in your life. Hell, I bet you've never even held a gun before today. The weapon wavered in his grip. Besides, I continued, if something happens to me, my money doesn't go to Jessica. It goes to my military charity. She gets nothing. You're lying. Am I? Jessica, did you ever see my will? Her face went pale. We never talked about wills. That's because you never asked about anything that mattered. You were too busy spending money to wonder where it came from or where it would go. Austin's desperation reached a breaking point. He lunged forward with the gun, but I was ready. 10 years of marriage to Jessica had taught me to anticipate emotional outbursts, and my military training kicked in automatically. I sidestepped Austin's clumsy attack, grabbed his wrist, and twisted until he dropped the gun. It clattered across the marble floor, the sound echoing through the empty mansion. You want to know the real truth? I said, pinning Austin against the wall. Reynolds has been working for me for the past month. Jessica gasped. That's impossible. Is it? Reynolds, why don't you tell them about our arrangement? Reynolds stepped forward, pulling out his phone. I've been recording everything for the past 20 minutes. Kidnapping, extortion, assault with a deadly weapon. That's about 15 to 20 years in prison. Austin's face crumbled. You can't. I have connections. Had connections. Past tense. Caroline made sure of that when she divorced you. Jessica sank to the floor, her designer dress spreading around her like spilled paint. This is all wrong. This isn't how it was supposed to happen. How was it supposed to happen, Jessica? You were going to humiliate me publicly, take half my money, and ride off into the sunset with Austin? Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? I loved him. You loved his money. Just like you loved mine, until you found someone with more. Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Frank had been tracking my phone, and Reynolds had called for backup when things started getting dangerous. The police are coming, I said. They're going to arrest you both for kidnapping and extortion. You'll probably get 5 to 10 years, depending on how good your lawyer is. Oh, wait, you can't afford a lawyer anymore. Jessica looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. Please, Evan. I know I hurt you, but please don't let them arrest me. I'll disappear. I'll never bother you again. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the sound of the crowd cheering when Austin proposed, the look of pure joy on her face when she said yes, the way she'd kissed him like I didn't exist. You made your choice, Jessica. At that party, in front of everyone who mattered to you, you chose to humiliate me, to throw away 10 years of marriage for a man you barely knew. Now you get to live with the consequences. The police burst through the mansion's front door, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Austin tried to run, but tripped over the gun he'd dropped, falling hard on the marble floor. Jessica didn't even try to escape. She just sat there crying as the officers read her rights. As they led Austin and Jessica away in handcuffs, Reynolds handed me a thick envelope. What's this? Signed confession from both of them, plus documentation of all their assets. What's left of them, anyway? Also, Jessica's engagement ring. She asked me to give it back to Austin, but he said he didn't want it. I looked at the ring, a gaudy thing that was all flash and no substance. Perfect for Jessica. Keep it, or sell it. I don't care. Outside the mansion, Frank was waiting by his car, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. So how does it feel? He asked. How does what feel? Total victory, complete and utter destruction of your enemies. The full revenge fantasy. I thought about it as we drove away from the mansion, leaving the police to process the crime scene. Jessica and Austin would go to prison. Their friends had already lost everything. The social circle that had treated me like dirt for years was completely destroyed. Empty, I said finally. Empty? I spent so much energy hating them, planning their destruction, that I forgot to figure out what came next. Frank was quiet for a moment. So, what does come next? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Dr. Sarah Chen, a brilliant engineer I'd worked with on a government project 2 years ago. She was funny, intelligent, and had never once made me feel like I wasn't good enough. Maybe it's time to find out what a real relationship looks like. I dialed her number as Frank drove through the Dallas night, the city lights twinkling like stars in the darkness. Sarah? It's Evan Hollis. I know it's late, but I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner tomorrow night. I have a lot to tell you, and for the first time in years, it's all good news, all good news, all good news, all good news, all good news.